Hi everyone, thanks for stopping by Pete's Garage. Now today we are going to paint a water pump for a big block Chevy. So I know what you're thinking, what's the big deal about painting a water pump? Well, as you know, I build a lot of engines here and I paint a lot of engines and I get a lot of questions about painting engines. Should I use a rattle can? Should I use a primer? Should I use a 2K? What should I use? Do I use high temp coatings? Incidentally, about a year ago, I sprayed the exhaust manifolds on the 62 Studebaker Hawk behind me, the CT Hawk with this high temp coating. We're going to take a look and see how this performed over the last year. And I think it worked out really well. So anyway, people are always asking me about painting. So we're going to go through some different paintings. And I don't think you can really paint an engine or paint an engine part wrong. But depending on the materials you use and the process of the steps that you go through, it just yields different results. That's about it. I will never say that something is wrong, you're doing that wrong. It's just that different combinations of materials and techniques, they just yield different results, that's all. So, well, okay, first things first, I know we were going to say, Pete, you need a haircut, you're looking a little gruff. Hey, I'm on vacation.
I'm on vacation!
So let's take a quick look at the exhaust manifolds on the Studebaker. I use this Eastwood High Temp coating on those manifolds. I have a video on how to put this on and how it bakes on. So let's take a quick look and see how that paint looks after a whole year of running through cruise nights, a lot of road trips, a lot of heating, cooling down, so I'll show you how that looks. Okay, the vehicle has come back to me for some work. I got some extra stuff to do. And I had to take the battery box out, which is great. Now we can take a look at the manifolds and see how they look. And as you can see, the exhaust manifolds held up very, very nice. There's no rust, and that paint held up great. I think that looks awesome. That material works very, very well. So I think it's safe to say these high temp coatings from Eastwood hold up great. After a year, they still look awesome. So what's the big deal about this water pump? Well, this water pump is going on a show car. A 69 Camaro with a 427 in it that I did the paint job on. It's a show car. It's a high dollar restoration. Thousands and thousands, many $60,000, $70,000 worth of restoration work, and it's got to look right. So I'm going to show you the process I go through to repaint parts on engines that I've already painted so that they look the same. Got to use the same process, and I'll show you some of the products I use and maybe some of the results that you might get when you use those products. Now again, I do keep an inventory of rattle can paints and 2K paints. 2K just means it's a two-part paint, a base and a hardener. And I keep some paints in stock because I do a lot of touch-up on engines, and I use a variety of products. I use the Duplicolor engine paints, the VHT high temp paints, again, Duplicolor engine enamels, plastic coat engine enamels for clears. So I use them a variety of materials also. I also use rattle cans. This Rust-Oleum, I had to use this Rust-Oleum enamel because it had a gloss. Particularly, this one was a semi-gloss. I had to paint an engine that required semi-gloss, and this is the only product I could find that came in semi-gloss, so I had to use it. So there's nothing wrong with using these kind of products. They just yield a little different result. They're not as high a gloss as like a 2K, like this Eastwood paint, but they're all acceptable. So if you want to use them, they're perfectly fine. Now I follow 3 simple steps whenever I paint an engine. First, you got to make sure it's clean. Second, make sure you're following the manufacturer's recommendations on how to mix, stir, shake, heat, temperature, whatever it is. Make sure you know what the manufacturers recommend for the application of their product. And the third thing is, don't rush. Not that kind of rush. Just take your time. Mask off the parts that you need to mask off. So while we're at it, let's talk about masking. Alright, so masking. On this water pump, first I want to make sure I mask off this where the pulley's going to go. I don't want to get any paint behind there. I don't want to ruin that, and sometimes the pulleys fit on here kind of snug, and I don't want to do that. So I'm going to mask that. Threaded holes. I'm going to put some plugs in these threaded holes. This threaded hole, a couple threaded holes here. You don't want to get paint in the threaded holes. On the back, there's a threaded hole down here that goes through for a mounting bracket. I'm going to mask those off. And you see we have different surfaces here. I have the cast metal here as it came from the factory, and you have this zinc plated part with steel bolts. These are all different metals, so they're all going to coat differently, which means if I just painted this with color, it would really look different. It would be hard to cover between these two colors. So I got to put a common primer, a primer with a common color on here, so it makes it very easy to put the orange on. Also, When you're masking off these holes for water ports, you want to make sure you mask off the whole port. Do the whole thing, because there's going to be a gasket has to sit here, and if you only do the hole here and you leave a little lip of paint, that can cause a leak. So mask off the whole surface. Take some time. Again, don't rush. Mask off the whole surfaces on all your mating surfaces where gasket goes. That way you're sure you won't have a leak. First things first, I got to clean the water pump, because after handling it, you see my hands are very greasy. There's an oil on there, and that all has to go before you put any paint on anything. All right, now first things first. Don't ever, ever, ever clean any engine part in a blast cabinet. I know it's easy to do. I could throw it in my blast cabinet, blast it down, clean it up, make it look real nice. But I'll tell you, one little grain of blast media gets inside that water pump, gets in the impeller, and it scratches it up. It's not going to work. Worse, it's going to hit the seal. It could cause the seal to leak. It's just going to wreak havoc. Now, if it's something like a valve cover, if you're going to blast a valve cover, clean it thoroughly. You have to know it's clean. Like I said, one little grain of blast media, one little bead of glass, one little bead of whatever it is that gets inside the engine, it's going to wipe out a bearing. You have to be ultra clean. So if you're going to do it, please be careful, but I really highly recommend don't blast your parts in a cabinet. If you have to, you got to make sure it's spotless. If there's little corners, crevices, you got to blow them out 5-6 times. Make sure it's clean. Now, that part just came out of the box. It's really clean. It's just got that, it almost smells like cosmoline on there, some kind of oil. And all I'm going to do is use the spray gun that I usually use to spray it with, and I'm going to use to spray it with. I'm just going to spray it with some lacquer thinner just to let it run down and make sure all that oil, all the oil that's on there will get dissolved. The lacquer thinner will dissolve it and it'll all run off. Now that it's clean, from here on in, I'll use latex gloves to make sure I don't get oil from my skin onto the part. Alright, now here's something that's really wild. I've made a bunch of videos about painting engines, painting parts, and I get text messages and phone calls from people all over the world telling me they can't get that product where they live. I'm going to be using an epoxy primer on that pump. Then I'm going to be using the Eastwood 2K engine paint, high temp engine paint, Chevy Orange. And I got emails and phone calls, mostly emails, people sending me messages saying that they can't get this where they live. For example, if you go right to Eastwood, even on Summit Racing, and try and buy epoxy primers and paints, it says right under Prop 65 warning, which means there's cancer-causing chemicals or chemicals that lead to birth defects. So some of the stuff, there's restrictions on shipping that. I got a message from a guy in Canada that says they won't even ship it to Canada. Maybe it's only parts of Canada. And the guys in Australia tell me that nothing is available there because everything is so harmful. So if you could do me a favor, could you please leave a comment below where you live? You don't have to say your name, but just say I live in wherever, Perth, Australia, and we can get epoxy primer, or this is the kind of stuff that's available where we live. We're here to help each other, and I get a lot of messages that people want to know what's available. So leave a comment below just where you are and what kind of paints can you use, or what kind of paints are banned from where you live. Okay, now I'm going to put on 1 coat of an epoxy primer, a metal etching primer. Then I'll put a couple coats of this on, the Eastwood 2K ceramic paint, ceramic engine paint. And here's the engine code if you want to look it up. The color code, Chevy Orange, 51618ZP is the number. Now Eastwood doesn't pay me, but I do use a lot of their products. This 2K engine paint, every time I paint an engine with it or an engine part, it looks fantastic. And that high temp coating that I put on those exhaust manifolds, you saw it after a year, still looks like the day I coated it. Now, if you haven't already, please click on subscribe. And if you'd like to get a notification, there's a bell underneath. You click on that bell, you get a notification every time I upload a video. Thanks for stopping by Pete's Garage.